A very warm welcome to 1000 PS TV from a seriously hot launch. The weather is hot and so is the bike, the Honda CB1000F. To me, this is simply the rebirth of the Bol. Stay tuned, it's going to be absolutely wild. Yes, the Bol in the 80s. Honda produced the Bol models from 1979 to 1983, namely the CB750F and the CB900F. They were genuinely charismatic motorcycles, big, substantial machines, and later on an 1100 version arrived as well. The CB750 and CB900 competed against the Kawasaki Z1000 and Suzuki's 1000cc GS. Back then, America had the AMA Superbike races. Nowadays, Superbikes are fully faired racing machines with little wings, but back then they were simply these muscle bikes lining up in AMA Superbike. And of course, that fascinated us beyond belief. One of the leading figures at the time was Freddie Spencer. Freddie Spencer is here, and I'll even get the chance to do a short interview with him. That is, of course, absolutely fantastic. Freddie Spencer.
My pleasure.
Freddie Spencer, it's a big honor for me. I'm really a big fan. And a big fan of you and of this AMA Superbike racing in the 80s.
Yes.
This was so fantastic. And this motorcycle, it reminds me on the CB900F
Yes.
that you raced in this AMA Superbike. I always wondered that these stock bikes, they did AMA Superbike racing, but these weren't stock bikes.
Yes.
They were really different.
Yeah, they were very, well, they started out stock. And the thing is that it was 70s technology, and they would, put a lot of horsepower in the engine and slick tires. And so it made the bikes not real stable. And so, but it taught us a lot. It was truly the beginning of, and I can speak, of course, specifically from Honda's standpoint, because I was involved in the first AMA Superbikes, and then when HRC was created. And so those first years, 80 to 85 specifically, was such a learning curve of how racing really improved our understanding of how a bike works. And then you could make the race bikes better, which we worked very hard to do. But at the same time, it trickled down to the street bikes for you average riders to have a better and safer riding experience. And that's what's so incredible about this. I know when first people look at it, they see the homage, the throwback and the tribute to the bikes from that era. And that's a visual. But the reality is this bike is a combination of that feeling with modern understanding, and blending that is not easy. And this is a bike, you could say in many ways, is 46 years in the making, because right? I mean, because this bike was originally in this colors and this basic look and understanding in 1980. And then all the things that Honda specifically learned since then, and motorcycling. And so you get the sensation, which is the cool part. You get the sensation of what it's like to ride a bike from a bygone era that everybody admires so much, because of the feeling that was developed during that era of how a bike feels and the excitement and where it touches you in your soul. But it's combined with all the technology today and it doesn't get in the way. And so I know a lot of y'all and a lot of people felt that over these 3 days, journalists from different countries. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of to be a part of is that whole journey.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I guess now we have 122 horsepower. Must be the same as your...
Yeah, it was the same. But trust me, the riding experience is completely different. I've actually ridden my 82 bike a couple of times in the last year because of this bike and because they wanted to show it. And it's the bike I won Daytona in March of '82, the last inline 1000, Honda that won the Superbike race. And before the rules got changed, 750 beginning in '83, which was the beginning of the Interceptor era.
Yeah.
And that was a huge jump in performance, But it, to have a bike with that characteristics in 1970 that went from like 75 or 80 horsepower in stock trim to 120 with slicks and all that power. I mean, it could be pretty, how should I say, unstable to control,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, it's what we knew at the time, right? And it's what we had to work with. And so I enjoy going back and riding it with modern tires because that really helps some of the characteristics be better.
Freddie,
My pleasure.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
For me, the true fascination with these motorcycles began right there because, as I said, Wes Cooley, Dave Aldana, then Eddie Lawson and Freddie Spencer were battling it out on these machines. It was simply brilliant. And now Honda has taken the plunge and brought this Bol d'Or back naturally with the latest technology. But they have genuinely managed to carry over the styling language from back then. In my eyes, it is a beautiful, magnificent motorcycle, right? As I said, we now have this bike here, so perhaps I should run through a few figures. We have a 1000 cubic centimeter inline 4 engine. We get 122 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute. There is 103 Newton meters of torque at 8,000 revolutions per minute, and the curb weight, meaning with the 16-liter fuel tank full, is 214 kilograms. So this is a genuinely excellent road bike. I have to admit I expected quite a lot from it because ultimately the bike is derived from the Hornet 1000. I rode the Hornet 1000 quite extensively last year. That is of course a truly excellent motorcycle and a proper backroad weapon. You could perhaps even place it in the Street Fighter category. This CB1000F may use the same engine, but it is anything but a Street Fighter. It is a proper retro muscle bike. As we already know, the engine originally comes from the 2017 Fireblade. In the Hornet and the CB1000 GT, Honda has naturally already reduced its output to 152 and 150 horsepower respectively. Now they have reduced the power to 122 horsepower, and of course the first thing that goes through your mind, and I had exactly the same reaction, is, come on, why didn't they leave the full 150 horsepower in there? It seems like such a shame. They did not leave it in because they wanted to give the engine a different character. They deliberately tuned it to pull harder from low revs and deliver more punch through the mid-range. They simply felt that the peak power right at the top was not quite as important. Whenever I hear something like that, I am usually a bit skeptical. But now that I have ridden it, I can say they were absolutely right. They were completely right. The engine now has milder camshafts and the intake side has also been revised. The intake trumpets are roughly 5 centimeters longer, while their diameter has been reduced by 6 millimeters. The cam profiles have become much milder. They have also made a few changes to the airbox and the exhaust system. Naturally, they have also adjusted the software, meaning the engine management system. The result is 122 horsepower, but it is genuinely true that it pulls incredibly hard from low revs. It really comes on strong from the bottom end. I had an absolute blast riding it like this, and once you move into the higher rev range, it naturally keeps getting stronger. This time though, the power delivery is very linear. It really is remarkably smooth and consistent. That means it is superbly usable throughout the entire rev range while still delivering serious shove. It really does pull hard. There is something else I did not believe beforehand either. The exhaust design looks incredibly good, exactly the way it should on a retro bike that reminds me of the old days, but I assumed the sound would probably be a little restrained. That is not the case at all. It has a mighty sound. I hope I managed to capture some of the sound of this bike in the onboard footage because it is simply glorious. Absolutely glorious. Naturally, you always hear it especially well when you are sitting in the saddle. But even when the other riders went past us, we were all thinking, blimey, that really does sound fantastic. Honda deserves a great deal of credit for making this work. Euro 5 Plus, yet it still has such an excellent sound. On top of that, the styling is relatively conservative and clearly inspired by the past. It is genuinely remarkable that it sounds so eager, aggressive and sporty. Another very important point about the engine, although I will be honest, this matters less to me personally, is that you naturally get a full electronics package. There is a 6-axis IMU, traction control and adjustable engine braking, with everything working according to lean angle and offering individual adjustment. We get 3 riding modes. One is standard, another is sport, and the third is rain. On top of that, there are 2 more modes that you can configure yourself. I think this level of personalization is genuinely excellent because, as I mentioned, the traction control is linked to the wheelie control, and it is very useful to be able to adjust that yourself. The same applies to the engine braking. Some riders want a lot of engine braking, while others prefer less. I think it is great that you can tailor that as well. Everything works together incredibly smoothly. The pre-configured standard mode has a slightly gentler setup, while sport is a bit sharper and more aggressive. As for rain mode, forgive me, but naturally I did not try that one. I originally set off in sport mode, then thought to myself that it might already be a little too sharp, so let us see what standard is like. Standard was wonderfully smooth. It is genuinely excellent when you are just pottering around town because the bike rides with incredible refinement. Smooth, yet still full of drive, absolutely brilliant. Once I had become a little more familiar with the bike though, I thought I really needed to try sport mode again. Personally, I never want to give up any performance or any of the immediacy in the way that performance is delivered. I always want the maximum that a motorcycle like this has to offer. In sport mode, after roughly the first 5 kilometers, I was getting on with it extremely well, and I absolutely loved it because it sounded very aggressive and accelerated with real force. Another important point here is the quickshifter. The quickshifter is an optional extra. It is not included as standard, but in my opinion it is something I absolutely have to recommend. You cannot buy a CB1000F and leave out the quickshifter. Well, of course you can. You can still shift manually naturally. The clutch action is genuinely light. It is a slipper clutch and the gearbox is incredibly precise and satisfying to use. But I found myself slotting the gears in with the quick shifter automatically, and it would be a shame to miss out on that. It adds another shade of immediacy and enjoyment, and in my opinion, it suits a retro motorcycle like this perfectly, because it may be a retro bike, but it is not an old bike. I also tried the quick shifter in every setting, or rather in every riding mode, and it really is excellent. Whether you are in sport or standard, the quick shifter simply works beautifully. Another point that I think is very important is the suspension. I do not know why, but for some reason I expected it to be slightly soft. I thought it might feel a bit soft and vague, although I have no idea why I assumed that, because it is not true at all. At the front, there is an upside-down fork with a separate function design. That means the spring preload is adjusted on one fork leg, while rebound and compression damping are adjusted on the other, and all of that is genuinely adjustable. I did not change anything myself. By now, I unfortunately have to admit that I weigh 85 kilograms. I hope that is still somewhere around an average figure, or at least one that represents a reasonably broad range of riders. In any case, it suited me perfectly. It really worked extremely well. Just a quick word about the suspension. At the rear, there is naturally a linkage-mounted shock, which is only logical. Spring preload and rebound damping are adjustable. I did not touch either of those settings. I simply rode the bike as it was, and I thought it worked brilliantly. Some of the roads were genuinely very poor, and I have to briefly mention Italy here. The area around Rome is unbelievably beautiful, truly stunning. But where there is rubbish, there is a lot of it. You would not believe what is lying at the sides of some of these roads. That shocked me a little because I am no longer used to seeing it. And of course, it seriously spoils this otherwise glorious landscape. How did I get onto that, right? Yes, the routes themselves have some wonderful bends and the area is genuinely magnificent, but the road surfaces are not always in great condition. There are some serious potholes, cracks and rough patches. The suspension dealt with all of that very well though, while still remaining comfortable. I could ride over those poor sections without too much trouble, and when the tarmac improved and I started pushing harder, it delivered exactly the firmness I wanted. It was genuinely stable. I had excellent feedback from the bike and was honestly very pleasantly surprised. I would not have expected it to be this enjoyable to ride. One reason it felt so good was the original equipment, Bridgestone Battlax S22 tire. For me, that is an absolutely superb tire. I know that tire extremely well, and I'm completely familiar with how it behaves. It offers excellent grip, helps the bike steer easily, and then you can really start pushing. You can see on the display when the traction control intervenes, although there were moments when I found myself wondering whether it had actually stepped in or whether I was simply riding unbelievably well. I was not looking at the display at the time, but I assumed the traction control was helping and doing so almost imperceptibly. The tire itself offered tremendous grip. It simply gives you a huge amount of confidence. And on this motorcycle, which looks as though it has come straight from 45 years ago, you can ride like an absolute lunatic. That is exactly what I want. Another point worth mentioning is the braking system. Brakes are always important. At the front, we have twin 310mm discs. It is not a full-on super sport setup, but rather a slightly more conservative system that still works extremely well, complete with cornering ABS. I was completely satisfied with it. There are certainly sharper systems out there, but in my opinion, anything more aggressive is unnecessary, right? And there is one thing I almost forgot, which I will show you now, even though you will already be seeing footage of it. The riding position is simply glorious. It really is fantastic. You can see it up there. In front of me is this beautifully shaped wide fuel tank. I have an incredibly lovely tapered aluminium handlebar in front of me with a very relaxed bend, and you can also see the foot peg position clearly. The knee angle is certainly sporty, but it is by no means extreme. You could undoubtedly cover huge distances on this bike, and as you can see up there, I simply get the feeling, blimey, this is superbike racing in the 80s. We feel completely young again. It really is absolutely fantastic. One detail that may not seem quite right at first glance, though, is this relatively large TFT display. I got used to it fairly quickly, although analog clocks would naturally look even more stylish. But that is not what we have here. Instead, there is a fairly large, I believe 5-inch TFT display, and it is very easy to read. They have used some clever solution where a type of resin sits between the two layers, helping the screen remain more legible in different lighting conditions. Exactly how they have achieved that from a technical point of view, I naturally do not know. What I can say is that I was always able to read it clearly. It also does an excellent job of displaying all the electronic functions. You get full connectivity as well, meaning navigation and everything else can be used through it. And naturally, all of that is much easier to provide with a TFT display. I think that should just about cover everything. Right, my friends, thank you very, very much for watching. This really was fantastic and I genuinely enjoyed it. The bike is simply world class. I am honestly delighted that something like this now exists. It is unbelievable. AMA Superbike racing has arrived in the 2020s. And yes, as I said, it was hot. The bike was hot and the weather was hot as well. So now please give the video a thumbs up and leave a few comments. Should there be anything you would like to know, I will be very happy to answer. Stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and ciao, bye bye, take care everyone, ciao, ciao.